Pressure. Okay, just waiting on Sue. You're good?
Yes.
Okay. Councilman Pentelow, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. And Sue, would you do us the honor of attendance?
Councilor Carbone?
Here.
Councilor Clancy?
Here.
Councilor Forrest?
Here.
Councilor Hill?
Here.
Councilor Lesser?
Here.
Councilor O'Connor?
Here.
Councilor Pentelow?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Mazzarella?
Here.
Mayor Rell?
Here. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
And welcome everybody to this eventful town council for the town of Weathersfield, Monday, May 22nd. Without further ado, I will turn the podium over to Matt Hart. I will still say you are the former town manager for the town of West Hartford. Sorry, you did an outstanding job there. I got to know you pretty well in that capacity, but I know you even better now that you are over at CROG as the executive director and doing great things not only for the town of Weathersfield, but all 31 other towns?
37 others.
30, okay. So I should pay more attention.
That's okay. No. Thank you so much for having me. Just wait a moment to get started here. And I like the chambers and the technology you have. That's great. So as the mayor said, my name is Matt Hart. I'm from the Capital Region Council of Governments, and I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about our work, what we do, and talk about some of the initiatives we have underway, how we're working to serve you and other towns within the region. Also very happy to take any feedback that you might have and any questions. And anything I can't answer this evening, I'll certainly note down and get back to the town manager. So what I want to cover a little bit tonight is an orientation, an overview of our organization for those of you who aren't familiar with us and with councils of governments in the state of Connecticut, what we do. I'll talk a little bit about our current initiatives, some special projects we have underway, some benefits we see in particular for Weathersfield, and then take any questions you may have. So councils of governments in Connecticut. We have councils of governments across the country. In Connecticut, we have 9. We have 9, and really we provide a geographic framework, if you will, that allow towns to come together to discuss regional issues. Things that towns may struggle to solve or address on their own. And we can think of any number of examples of that. We also work to coordinate and deliver various federal and state services, which I'll elaborate on later on. Councils of governments, or COGs, can also function as what's called the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or the MPO. The MPO, that's a federal designation from the Federal Highway Administration, and in that role, we administer federal and some state transportation dollars. And I'll talk about that in a little more detail as we move on. So you see the capital region here in the north central part of the state. We're the largest council of governments in Connecticut. We have 38 municipalities, a residential population of approximately 1 million people, a geographic area of approximately 1,000 square miles. So we're good sized by Connecticut standards. And you see we go west to the town of Southington, we go east to Mansfield and Willington, and north to Massachusetts in both directions. So I talked about the fact that we serve almost 1 million residents. We've got but we're small. We're a small organization. We have approximately 30 employees in 4 departments, and I'll touch on their work over the next couple of slides. So the first department I would highlight is our Municipal Services and Administration Department, and they support our Municipal Services Committee, which the town manager sits on as your representative. They also support our purchasing coalition, our Capital Region Purchasing Coalition, which has over 100 members. We've got municipalities from across the state that participate in that. And through the purchasing coalition, we do the due diligence on the part of our members. We will go out and competitively bid commodities, supplies, and some services so that you can purchase, members can purchase things off of our list. This department also conducts various special projects, which I'm going to touch on a little bit later on. We've got one underway right now in the waste management area, and we do some legislative advocacy. Each and every year, we put together a legislative agenda of issues that we think are important to the region, and we present them to our delegation. And I believe we've got 58 legislators at the General Assembly from CROG's municipalities. The next department I want to touch on is relatively new. It's our Department of Regional Planning and Development. And that department is responsible for providing staff support to our Regional Planning Commission and to providing support to our town planners, our economic development folks, our environmental planners, etc. We also administer a brownfields remediation program under this department. The next department I would highlight is transportation planning. That's the single largest department at CROG, and this is where most of the money is. Most of our approximately $8 to $9 million budget is federal highway funds that is administered by our transportation planning department. They support our transportation committee and the MPO itself, and administer state and federal transportation monies. A couple of examples would be the local transportation capital improvement program, or LOTSIP, which has proven to be very popular over the past decade. I know your town has received some grants under that program. And then a more recent one is TRIP, which is a new program for rural communities that you probably wouldn't qualify for. This department also conducts various planning studies like corridor studies, and those are important because they eventually become the basis of actual projects, of actual design and construction projects for road improvements. And then the last department I would touch on is a small but mighty department, if you will. They like it when I use that phrase. That's our Public Safety and Homeland Security department here. And they support our Capital Region Emergency Planning Council. They also support the Capital Region Police Chiefs Association and administer a variety of grants that support public safety units across our region, public health departments, and emergency management as well. So that's a quick tour of our 4 departments that we have. Let's talk a little bit about our governance structure now. So our major board, which is somewhat analogous to a town or city council, is our policy board. It's comprised of 40 members. Each of the 38 towns, the chief elected official is automatically a member of that board following their election, and they have the ability to designate an alternate. And then the city of Hartford has 2 additional representatives, so there's some slight weighted representation for the city of Hartford. So the mayor serves as your official representative to the policy board, and the town manager is his alternate, and both are very active in our meetings. The Transportation Committee, that's the committee, again, that supports the MPO, that administers the federal and state transportation dollars. Typically, it's town engineers, public works directors, et cetera, who serve on this committee. And in your case, it's Mr. Greger, your town engineer. Our Regional Planning Commission, they administer our Regional Plan of Conservation Development projects, land use projects within close to a town's boundary need to be referred to this entity. So if there's a project in your community that's adjacent to the city of Hartford, some of your other neighbors, that project will need to be referred to this committee for its review to determine to what extent it's consistent with our Regional Plan of Conservation and Development. And their guidance is advisory only. And Attorney Roberts serves as your representative on that committee. The Municipal Services Committee, which I mentioned earlier, the town manager's your representative. He's been very, very active since he started, which is great. This is the committee that vets ideas for potential new services. And we talk about emerging issues across the region. You know, for example, how are towns dealing with affordable housing or stormwater management or our workforce shortages, any number of things that we discuss in that committee. And then last but certainly not least, I wanted to highlight our Capital Region Emergency Planning Council. And the representatives here are typically public safety personnel, people working in police, fire, emergency management, and that holds true in your community as well. You can see the representatives here, your police chief, your EMD and fire marshal, and your deputy EMD. So you're very, very, very well represented on our committees, and want to thank all the members for their engagement there. I want to touch on a couple of current initiatives that I think either you're directly involved in right now or you would find illustrative. So the first one I would highlight is the Regional Performance Incentive Program, or RPIP. That's a grant provided by the state. It's administered by OPM. And under that program, the state provides 3 years of seed monies to help establish a new regional program or initiative. So last year, we received 3. We received grants to establish a regional program in animal control, a second one in assessment, and a third in code enforcement with an emphasis on building inspection. And what we're looking to do with these 3 programs is to supplement the services that are presently provided by our member towns. You know, if, for example, you're experiencing a staff vacancy, or maybe you're facing a particularly busy time in the code enforcement world, you know, we want to be able to meet your needs here. And conceivably, if we're successful over this 3-year program, some of our smaller towns may decide to rely on us almost exclusively for these services. But we think that would be generally just our smallest communities. So right now, I believe you're participating in our discussions in the animal control program, and I think you've expressed an interest in the building official program as well. And right now, we are advertising for part-time trained and certified building officials. So we want to be able to hire a small number of folks who are willing to work part-time, and we can deploy them in our member towns, again, if they, when they have a need. The assessment program, we're struggling to get off the ground a little bit. It's mainly our eastern, towns in our eastern region that have expressed an interest in that. But again, we received this grant. It's 3 years of state funding. The state grant de-escalates over time. The local contribution increases over that 3-year period, with the thinking that if it's successful in year 4, you know, the towns and the region will be funding it without state support. So this is a program the state has had for about a decade now. It was created under the Malloy administration, and the Lamont administration has brought it back for the first time. I want to touch on a couple of infrastructure projects that I think you would find relevant. You've probably all heard, I'm sure the town manager has talked to you about the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is funding infrastructure across the country. The state of Connecticut is slated to receive approximately $6 billion over a 5-year period. We are now in year 2 of the program. One of the grant opportunities that we think is the most promising for our member towns is what's called Safe Streets for All. And those mainly are improvements you would make to your streets, to help them, make them more safe for all road users. People driving, pedestrians, cyclists, you name it. So the second year of that program, what's called the Notice of Funding Opportunity, has just been released, and I believe your town is looking at the potential for a grant in this second year. So we're actively working to support you there. The second one, a RAISE grant, that's another infrastructure grant. I know that you applied for a RAISE grant, I believe, in collaboration with Rocky Hill to look at improvements to Silas, Deane. You know, and we were happy to assist you in reviewing that grant, and hopefully you receive that, and if indeed you do receive it, we'll be able to support you with the administration of it. I wanted to highlight this because I think it's also relevant for the East Coast Greenway, and I know you've had some discussions about extending the bikeway to the south. So in 2021, actually in 2022, I'm sorry, last year, we received a $16.4 million raise grant from the federal government to help construct, to close the gaps in the Farmington Canal Heritage Trail in the town of Plainville, not that far, and also to establish a connection from the main trail to the CT Fast Track station in New Britain. So we'll have that connectivity. The rail trails are pretty extensive here in Connecticut. We're pretty fortunate in that regard. I don't know if you've ever heard of the East Coast Greenway. That's a multi-use trail that's designed, that will be running from Georgia to the state of Maine. Roughly 50% of it has been completed thus far. Almost 200 miles of it will be in Connecticut alone. And we're working on a project right now to bring the trail over from Simsbury through Bloomfield into Hartford, across the river into East Hartford. And that way we'll be able to connect our rail trail in western Connecticut with the system we have in eastern Connecticut. And that should prove to be pretty beneficial for the region. So I wanted to highlight that as you consider multi-use trail projects. Second example I wanted to highlight, and again this is illustrative for you, is our transit-oriented development study. So the communities we have, 8 communities we have along the Hartford line, along the Hartford rail line, from Berlin, New Britain, up north to the town of Enfield. 8 communities there. We've conducted a project where we are assessing opportunities for transit-oriented development, the potential along the line, adjacent to where those communities are planning a rail station or a CT Fast Track station. And then the last current initiative I wanted to highlight, which your community, which your town is participating in. I think we've all read about the waste management challenges that the state is facing. We're aware of the fact that the MIRA has closed its waste-to-energy plant in the city of Hartford. So a couple of years ago, CROG, we embarked upon our own waste management study to give us a set of recommendations that we can use moving forward in following MIRA's closure. So we conducted this study. They presented a series of recommendations to our board. Many of the recommendations could be implemented by a regional solid waste authority. So we're fortunate. We had one on the books, the Central Connecticut Solid Waste Authority, or CSWA. We have 14 member towns, and you are one. So we presented the study to the member towns, and we'll be looking to move forward with the recommendations to get the Solid Waste Authority up and running again. And CROG provides staff support to CSWA through an agreement. And we're going to be looking at things like, how do we get organics out of the residential and commercial waste stream? How can we improve on recycling? What more might we be able to do with extended producer responsibility and other things? What communities may wish to do something adopt something of a pay-as-you-throw model? You know, those communities who are interested in that. And we think we can capture an economy of scale by working together under this regional solid waste authority here. So very excited about the potential there. So just a couple more slides, and I'll be happy to wrap up and take your questions. Talking a little bit about the direct benefits for your community. Each and every year, we prepare a benefit statement for all 38 towns. And it's a 5-year snapshot. It's a retrospective 5-year snapshot. So this is the benefit statement that we prepared for you for 2018 through 2022. And you'll see, I'm sorry, it's a little bit faint. Actually, I think you can read it pretty well on the screen there. This is our assessment, and you'll see how the dollars break down on the left-hand side between our various programs, and then an example of the most significant projects on the right-hand side. So our calculation over the 5-year period is we think your return on investment is pretty robust. You know, you pay dues of approximately $103,000 over that 5-year time frame, and our assessment of the benefits you received is approximately $3.8 million. And your current dues are approximately $21,000. So some of the more significant projects were probably lot SIP projects, as I said early on, that Highland Street pavement rehabilitation, and then the Wolcott to Franklin reconstruction. Those are the most significant projects during this time frame. Just some highlights from the previous year, not the current year we're in, but the previous year, working to support public safety, homeland security, our regional health departments. We administer a variety of grants on their behalf. We brought in $1.2 million to benefit our local and regional health districts. On the transportation side, transportation funding side, again, this is, I think, where you see the largest, most significant financial benefit through your membership in CROG. In FY22, we administered over $44 million in transportation funding, and we're going to exceed that in the current year. We conducted a variety of important planning studies. We looked at the financial impact, the economic impact of the Hartford rail line. We initiated that transit-oriented development study that I talked about. Our purchasing coalition worked to save our members time and money as well. Almost $1.9 million through the purchasing council. And then we have this Easy IQC program, which is in place for small building projects. And it's a faster, more expedited system than towns attempting to do those projects on their own through their own procurement processes. And then before I close, Mayor, I want to highlight our upcoming annual meeting. Hopefully all of you are welcome, and hopefully several of you will be able to attend. I know it is a daytime meeting. We're going to be meeting at the Riverfront Recapture Boathouse in Hartford on June 15th. Registration will open at 1:30. Michelle McCabe, who is the relatively new executive director for Connecticut Main Street, will be our keynote speaker. She's going to talk about, what makes successful practices for downtowns here in Connecticut and around the country. Our policy board chair, Mayor Stewart, she'll make some remarks as well, and then I'll give a state of the region, if you will. And we'll have a social hour to follow at the Boathouse. So, Mayor, I appreciate the time. Happy to take any questions you or other council members may have, as well as any suggestions you might have for additional programs and services we could look to provide. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Very informative for CROG. I've got a couple questions. I will save those for the end. And I don't know if any council members have any questions for Matt on the work CROG does on behalf of Weathersfield. Councilman Forrest?
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you.
Excellent first name.
Indeed.
I noticed, when we're looking at sort of the makeup of the structure of your organization, that there's a policy board. Could you tell us what are the top policy initiatives? We certainly talked about what you do, right? Mm-hmm. But from a policy perspective, when you meet with that policy board of all the regional towns and cities, what are the leading 3 to 5 policy directives that the towns have coalesced together to say these are our policy initiatives?
Great question. So most of the policy discussions actually happen at the committee level, Councilor. And at the policy board, which is, again, analogous to a town or city council, most of the items on our agenda have already been vetted by one of our committees, whether it's the Municipal Services Committee, Transportation Committee, what have you. We'll also typically invite in a guest speaker. I'm relatively new in this role, as the mayor said when he introduced me, and we're initiating a strategic visioning process for CROG. And we're going to be holding a policy board retreat in a couple of weeks where we're going to be talking about that exact topic. And one of the items we'll be discussing is how do we provide more time and a space for policy discussions at the policy board level. So looking at our previous discussions, the various plans we have in place, there are any number that are particularly relevant at this point in time. Housing, what are we going to do as potentially a region? And I would broaden it from affordable housing is maybe the key component, but I think housing more generally. And do we want to prepare a regional strategy to address our housing needs? Waste management, talked about that early on. What are we going to do as a region with Mira's closure? you are all now in a position where we're hauling most of our residential waste to other parts of the country. And is that sustainable long-term? Arguably, it's not. So what are we going to do there in the waste management space? Transportation. We're doing a lot of work in Vision Zero. I don't know if folks have heard of Vision Zero, but that's an effort, a philosophy to make our roads safe for all road users. And how do we leverage those federal dollars so that we can complete good projects in our member towns? That's a third example of what I would highlight. Workforce shortages. We're starting to get into the workforce development space too, for the public sector. We're seeing large numbers of retirements at the local government level where we don't have trained people to replace them, whether it's a building official or a finance director or a town assessor. And not a lot of people are working in that space. So how can we, as a region, work to address it? You know, and I could go on and on, but that's an example of kind of four major issues that we're working to address right now.
So when you discuss those four, a lot of which we saw on the slideshow, I'm imagining CROG as sort of a representative of the towns, plural, right? The region, plural. And while you certainly have, sorry, there's a mosquito that's right around here. And it looks like when you're talking about those, it almost sounds like you're fulfilling the role of the old county government, right? Where we have these county type issues. But do you see CROG as having, there's a mosquito again. Do you see CROG as having a role as actually representing the town's interests or the region's interests, not necessarily in planning or administering federal grants? Because the state could do that, or we could get direct payment. But for the town's voices at the government, so whether it's lobbying for different states' things that the towns have, the things that you talked about sounded more like regional planning and regional administration of grants rather than the town's voice at the state legislature. Could you talk a little bit about your role in that capacity specifically?
We do some of that. You know, as I said, we prepare an annual legislative agenda. That's a list of issues that we think are most relevant to us as a region, or that we want to pursue as a region. A lot of it's infrastructure related. Housing, PFAS, you know, contaminated water, any number of things. We're not looking, though, to duplicate the role played by CCM, the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, or the Connecticut Council of Small Towns, COST. You know, we'll work in collaboration with them, and we want to be a resource to our legislators, too. When our legislators are working on key legislation and they're looking for some technical expertise on something that relates to one of our core disciplines, you know, we're there to connect with them. But if our towns, just and I know you've got a follow-up there, if our towns are facing a key issue or a crisis, you know, we can serve as a forum to mobilize to address it. And one example I would point to within the last 5 years is the crumbling foundations crisis that we were dealing with and are still dealing with in the eastern part of our region, where CROG played an enormously instrumental role in convening the parties to help craft a solution to that extensive problem.
So it sounds like, though, from a policy standpoint, from the voice not of the towns, not necessarily of planning, that you look maybe towards CCM or cost to be more of that legislative advocate for the different issues that are at the town level. Is that generally accurate?
Yes, at the very municipal level. If something is regional, in scope, and that's where we think we can play a larger role, a more significant role.
Okay. Just a couple thoughts then as you work, and you may have some CCM, I'm talking about some regional concepts. We all have in different areas our where the state of Connecticut has maybe some significant land, certainly in this town, takes away from our taxable ability to tax. And I'm sure there are many other towns that have lots of, Newington has the Department of Transportation, and it goes on and on. So we may be able to look at the pilot reimbursements or maybe some other functionality, which would help this town, and I'm sure many other towns regionally, earn or associate that there are lost revenue for those state lands. That's one concept. Second concept is also consolidation of services that may be naturally consolidatable. So one concept is that, does every town need their own tax collector, really? Can we regionalize different types of concepts? So you talk about so we may talk about regionalization within CROG, within that greater amount. And there might be some platform by which you could present to us regionally some ways in which the first steps in that type of regionalization could happen, and therefore lower perhaps our cost, especially with the use of technology these days, tax collecting, et cetera. We have to vote on a very expensive plan for assessment, right? There'll be another kind of tax collection and tax assessor, those types of things. And then also the possibility regionally of new revenue streams that we don't currently see, that are not based on our property tax, majorly based on our property tax. So those new revenue streams, I think, would be helpful for the region in general. So those are sort of three ideas that I think we see on a yearly basis when we have to work out and make very, very hard decisions. We're struggling for those types of results.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would note just quickly on the revenue diversity item, yes, I've long been interested in that, well before I took this position. And I am a member of the Advisory Committee on Intergovernmental Relations, which is a state commission, and we're discussing that very, very topic. And I think it's something we can flag for our upcoming board retreat. And then with respect to the consolidation of services, we're working to do that through that RPIP program. And I do think in the future there are any number of opportunities there. And I would point to regional health districts as one successful model here in Connecticut.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else with any questions for Matt?
I have a question for the town manager. Fred, I just have a quick question and it's not to question your numbers, but do you feel we've gotten $3 million in benefits out of this for 100,000?
I would say absolutely, just based upon the grants alone that they had helped to secure and administer and all that work, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was an easy one. Going back to what Councilman Forrest had said, I had actually written down in my notes county versus regional. So we always hear, oh, we can't do that in Connecticut. It's 169 individual towns. They all want their own local control. And then they, even the town manager, having just previously served as a county administrator, there is a big difference between other states and what they do and what Connecticut does. And I mean, you probably are going to answer this with a yes. I mean, do you see that CROG is that bridge between 169 individual towns and then going forward with a community or a county form of government, that we may not need that in Connecticut? We are a small town, but CROG and the other 8 regional governments provide that role where we don't need to say, okay, let's scrap what we're doing, 200 plus years of the same and go with a county form of government. I suspect CROG and the others fulfill that role and then some. Advocacy at the legislative level, I know is important as well. Is there anything more that we as an individual town can do to provide support for CROG in what you are doing and what you see going forward?
Thank you, Mayor. So a couple of items, and then I'll answer the last piece last. So yes, you're right. Connecticut is one of only 2 states, us and Rhode Island, without any formal county government. We did away with it, I think, in 1959, 1960. What COGS, I think, can provide some of what counties do. Potentially be a bridge in the future I think Connecticut has been loath to reestablish county government for any number of reasons. Concerns about tax burden, introducing another layer of government. At a council of governments level, we don't have any taxing authority. But if we want to get into providing more direct municipal services, like Councilor Forrest talked about, I think we could do that through the establishment of service districts. And towns who are interested could pay in. And we could do more on a regional scale. And I do see it as the future, given the recruitment and retention challenges we're facing now. We just don't have the trained workforce we once had. So I think it's actually going to push us into consolidating many basic local government services here in our state. And I think we can be a vehicle, we, COGS, can be a vehicle for helping to set that up. And we're increasingly doing that. CROG's not the only one involved in that space. The other councils of governments are doing that work too. In terms of what more you could do, I would encourage you to remain active like you are now. You're one of our more active members and would like to see you, remain a very, very active participant. And utilize our services. Utilize our services. We've just rolled out a new service. We're trying to create more of a grants administration type program. And we're encouraging all of our towns, if you've got a capital project on the books, maybe it's that you think might be eligible for federal funding, maybe it's a couple years down the pike, come to us with your idea, and we'll take a look at all the federal and state grant funding opportunities that are available and see to what extent we can help line you up for that source of funding. So I would encourage you to remain involved, to take advantage of our services. The town manager, early in his tenure, he's doing a great job at that, brings a lot of good energy to us and expertise from other parts of the country.
Great. The animal control, and I know that it's relatively new for us that, we were able to partner with CROG and OPM on those funds. Just for the council's edification, this came to us, I think, over the winter, if I'm not mistaken, that, we have a dated animal control shelter in town. It's at the transfer station, for those that don't know it. We were looking, the ideas that we bounced off of each other for an hour had us moving it to some other town and regionalizing it and working with other towns to partner with us. It's good to know that we are moving forward with that OPM grant to be able to do that. Is there, and maybe it's just an offline question for the town manager, is it a competitive grant, or are we working with other towns, or not working with, but like competing against other towns for part of that
Other
fund?
councils.
Okay.
Not the animal control program itself. The grant opportunity is competitive.
Okay.
And we submitted 4 applications. We surveyed our members first. What do you see as the most critical needs? And those 3 services plus economic development were that's where the largest number of votes were. So we submitted 4 applications, and we were fortunate we got 3 out of the 4.
That's great. And then finally, the return for our dollar, I'll just tell you, having been on the council for a number of years prior to this role, the Highland Street project was always something we were working towards. And then finally, we got the approval from the state to have it a LoSiP project. Same thing with the Wolcott Hill to Hartford border project. Those 2 projects alone are a couple $1 million each that we were able to take the benefit of partnering with CROG and then the state to pay for that. It does take a while, I will tell you that. It's bureaucracy at its best or worst. But those 2 projects, the Highland Street project wrapped up a little over a year ago, and if anybody goes up to Wolcott Hill heading into Hartford, that one's underway right now. So 2 great projects for the town of Weathersfield, and I think they've we've definitely reaped the benefits of partnering with CROG and the state on those as well. So thank you for that.
Just one follow-up question is, so with the additional services you're talking about and offering, do we end up having to pay more now with our dues to get those, or is it always included?
It's always.
So when you add new ones, our fees don't go up?
Well,
If you choose to participate in something, it's going to be a little bit of an à la carte menu, if you will. Then you would need to contribute to that particular program. So, for example, those towns that are participating in the animal control program will all be paying a portion of the local share. And those costs will gradually increase over the 3-year time frame. But the primary services you receive through the council governments are funded through 3 main sources. Approximately 50% of our revenues come from federal highway funds, and then we've got a state grant that's pretty significant at about 25 to 30% of our revenues. And then our local dues comprise about 8% of our revenues. And our dues, I believe, it's a $3,000 base fee that every community pays, and then there's a per capita assessment of, I believe, 61 cents per resident.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Hart? Seeing none? No? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor.
We appreciate
Thank you
it.
all.
Thank you.
Okay. We've got no hearings before us tonight, so I'll move right over to general comments from the public. Is there Ms. Keene? And I just wanted to remind those of us up here, there was a note, so I got a note before class that we all need to speak into the microphones. And I'm not picking on anybody in particular, but
That does help if you're watching it at home. Okay, my name is Judy Keene, 126 Broad Street, and I'm president of the Richard M. Keene Foundation. Carolyn Fazina is also here tonight. She is our director of programs. I'm here tonight to encourage the town council to revisit the decision not to distribute the ARPA funds that were intended for nonprofits in the community. I would like to let you know how these funds would impact the Keene Foundation after-school enrichment programs. This year, we had record enrollment in our programs. Over 1,776 enrollments in the after-school programs this year. By the way, that's the same as 1776, our year of freedom. We had over 648 unique students enrolled. That's approximately a third of the student enrollment in the elementary schools. We have been running the Keene on Kids after-school programs in partnership with the Wethersfield Parks and Recreation Department and the Wethersfield School District for the past 7 years. We have been delivering engaging enrichment programs to all Wethersfield elementary school children. In addition, 1,902 students K through 6 have had a dynamic, fun, and educational hands-on learning program in their own classroom. These programs followed the science curriculum in each grade and included engineering, biology, nutrition, physics, and many more, depending upon the grade. The teachers raved about the programs, and the children absolutely loved them. One day I went to one of the programs, and it happened to be worms that day, and there were worms on every desk, and the kids were absolutely engaged in the program. The teachers loved it, from an Emerson 6th grade teacher. My classes, and I want to thank you so very much for the enrichment class that Andrea Glico presented last Tuesday. The kids learned so much, and they had fun, a perfect combination. A Highcrest 5th grade teacher said, "My students learned the value of trial and error and were able to engage with a teacher other than the one that they have had all year." A Web third grade teacher said, "Totally supported my science unit. Because they were engaged, the kids were better able to retain information, which in turn supported further learning in the unit." I'm just here to tell you that our money will run out as we continue to support all of these programs, and that is what we want to continue to do. These programs are very expensive to provide with personnel, supplies, insurance, printing, all, you got it. Individual and corporate donations are down now, and grants are not as plentiful as they were in the past. We continue to solicit donations, and we work very hard on events like our Coveside Carnival, the 5K in June, which is coming up in 2 weeks, the golf tournament with Unico in May, and the Luminaria at the holidays. I cannot tell you when our funds will be depleted, but that time will come eventually, and I dread that I will have to tell parents and children that we no longer can support these programs. Most towns do not have after-school enrichment programs like ours, or hands-on science programs in every classroom in the elementary schools. Weathersfield only has these programs because they are predominantly paid for by the Keene Foundations. Students do pay a nominal fee for classes if they are able, but this fee does not cover all of our expenses. Years ago, we made a decision to pay the excess so that no child would pay more than $10 per class. And we also gave out 11 scholarships this spring to students in need. Again, I ask you that you reconsider the distribution of funds originally designated for nonprofits in the community. Obviously, I would like to have the entire amount for the Keene Foundation, but even a portion of the funds would help to delay that day when we can no longer offer programming to our youth. Any questions? No? I think it's a given that we need to continue to support these programs for the children in the elementary schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Not a question, but I'm happy to say that part of Mrs. Aglico's after-school program is staffed by my daughter Madeline for her civics credits for school. So,
I'd like to have all the kids involved.
yep, she was part of the worms.
That was fun.
Okay, anybody else? Mr. Young?
Good evening, Robert Young, 20 Copper Mill Road. The discussion tonight regarding the CROG, as I'm sitting out here in the gallery, all I could think of is county government. I also can think back, I'm a collector of finance information from the state of Connecticut, and I have seen the dollars that go to these regional governments. And it's horrendous. I mean, you may as well have a county government from the numbers that I've seen. And I continue to see them coming, payments from the state of Connecticut to CROG, whichever, all those different 8 organizations, they just suck up a lot of money. And I don't know where the value is, if there is any value in all of that, because eliminating the county government, they just brought in another government, and probably some of the county government was elected type people, where here they're all appointed people. Tonight you have Mrs. Keene up here talking about some money that she would like to see get from the ARPA funds, and you know, you had the Historic Society that wanted, what, $160,000? The Historic Society that had over $1 million in assets. The society that had over six figures sitting in their bank accounts. And they came in and asked for $160,000. And of course, I understand that was put on hold. But what bothers me is that they even made it up there to be brought up to the table with the kind of assets they have. I don't know what Mrs. Keene has for assets, but I really believe that if you are looking to give this $160,000 to somebody, you might want to get her financial statements and see that she's not as wealthy as the Weathersfield Historic Society. And maybe she should get some of that, or all of it, or whatever. But I'm sure her organization does a lot of service for the children. Can you imagine that, me saying that? But I'm sure she puts out a lot of value. Anyway, next. Tonight on your agenda, you have some discussion where you have $1,123,000 sitting in ARPA money that you're looking to allocate. And some of the allocation, from what I read quickly, was you wanted to put $15,000 in economic strategic plan. You wanted to put $69,000 in a truck. You wanted to put $125,000 in some town radio, whatever. You know, guys, why don't you put this money on highways in town? Our roads are in horrible shape. You know, I mentioned I witnessed in this room prior to COVID, beautiful things you're going to do on Wilkett Hill Road, north of Route 15. I understand now, after all this time, there's some work being done up there. All this time, from the beginning of COVID till now. I mean, how slow do you go? But I would think that you should take that 1 million, find another million, and put more roads, get more roads in shape. There's more people that ride on our roads than do anything else in town. I've gone to the transfer station, and I see so many trucks. I see so many vehicles. I mean, do we have a vehicle for every employee down there? And do we have a surplus? I mean, good grief, another truck down there. That's it. Next. I was driving around town, State Street and Main Street. I drove up Main Street to State Street, where the town is having some beautiful work done on the roads up there. There's an intersection, and I couldn't believe the intersection, how it was shaped this way, and the road continues down to the cove. And if you had a big truck, you had a fire vehicle, he's going to have one heck of a job making a turn. And it's all concrete pavement, curbing that you're putting in. My suspicion is in 10 years from now, you'll be replacing it. Because I think it's a disaster. Whoever approved such a thing, putting in a road that should have been 90 degrees at Main Street and State Street. Instead, you got something that goes off like this, and that's the only way the traffic can go. And if they want to go to the cove, they've got to make a heck of a turn. And if it's an emergency type vehicle, I think you're going to have an issue. So I think instead of waiting 10 years, Mayor, to have it fixed, you might want to go down and look at it and maybe have them fix it the right way. You know, you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on redoing fields at Mill Woods. You called it, put drainage in. Those were new fields 10 or 15 years ago. Didn't they do it right? Or is this, they did it wrong, and now we're going to redo it again and use ARPR money to do the fields down there, and then we'll be looking for some kind of money to fix this thing over on State Street and Main Street along the
Mr. Young,
way.
your 5 minutes are up. You can continue at the second portion at the end of the meeting.
Sure.
Anybody else looking to speak? Seeing none, we will move on to council reports. On boards and commissions, Councilman Lesser?
Thank you, Mayor. I have two to report on. First, the Veterans Commission met on May 10th, and we talked about a few things, but just a couple I want to highlight. And I'm going to highlight the first one by passing out these Veterans Hotline and talk about it a little bit. So this is a card that has been produced in the state to deal with the problem of suicide, which is a terrible problem among veterans. And on the back of the card, it gives, and it's designed to go for police officers to have and other folks that may be responding to calls. So we discussed this, and we discussed creating our own in Weathersfield, not just on suicide, but other issues affecting veterans and where they can go to get help. And it would be designed like this, and we would be giving it to our first responders and other interested parties. So that was one major topic. And then we talked for a while, and then it blended into the second meeting, which is the Memorial Day Parade Committee, about the parade. And just as a reminder, parade is this Saturday at 9 o'clock. But it is, the theme of it is Our Greatest Generation. And Barbara Rule will be talking about her father's service and in World War II, and Tony Camilleri will be talking about his father's service in World War II. I know the mayor will be speaking, and it's a great event. Hope the community can come out. The second meeting I want to highlight is I attended the EDIC meeting on Thursday, and two things I want to, you may all be aware of this, but it's good for the public to know, and if some counselors aren't aware. Two things I want to highlight that we talked about in that meeting. First, Weathersfield was selected as the 25th best town to visit in the summer in the United States as a destination. There was only one other town in Connecticut, Mystic, I think was 16th. Hopefully we'll beat them next time. But it was great recognition for Weathersfield.
They have an aquarium.
Aquarium. There was great recognition for Weathersfield, 25th best town in the entire country to visit in the summer. And the second thing to point out that we talked about is, and I think I'm going to try and read this, is there going to be, I think it started today, billboards going up from the Heritage Commission that's sponsoring this. Judy knows more than I do, but it's up today, and it says, if I can, yeah, come explore Weathersfield, Connecticut's largest historic and cultural district, historicweathersfield.org, and there's a picture of the Silas Robbins house. So really great stuff about our town. The billboard is up today, and over the next month, I think there'll be different billboards running. So some great recognition in terms of some national recognition as a place to visit, and then the billboards. So just wanted to highlight those, and we talked about them at length at the EDIC meeting.
Where is the billboard? I didn't catch that.
So it's going to rotate. So this week, it is just as you're leaving the city, heading south on 91. It's the first billboard you see as you're leaving the city. It was very prominent this morning. I noticed it as I was driving back. So
They're digital, so they can
yeah,
do whatever company owns the billboard can rotate that screen to.
I think there's 5 different locations over the course of a few months. They're going to be rotating around.
I think it's great. And Judy, thank you to you and the Heritage Commission. I think it's great for the town. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other reports from boards and commissions? Seeing none, mine will be coming up later for the Housing Authority block grant amount. And now we'll turn over to councilor comments. Any councilor comments?
Am I going to be the only one again? Sorry.
No, I've got one.
I just want to highlight that this Thursday, and you're all invited, at Pitkin at 9 o'clock, and this has been some of the work of the Career Advisory Board that I've told you about before, we will be highlighting businesses in Weathersfield and surrounding towns that have taken in Weathersfield students as interns. The interns will be speaking about their experiences with our local businesses, and the businesses will be talking about the program and how much they benefit from having Weathersfield students as interns. And we're going to highlight that at the breakfast Thursday morning. It's at 9 o'clock at Pitkin if anybody wants to join. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else with any comments? I've just got a couple dates for you all to put down. I know two of them are after, maybe just one of them is after our next meeting. But this Thursday night at 6:30 at the Pavilion at the Mill Woods, WEC's PEP graduation ceremony is going on. I've been attending, I think, since, if not the first one, the second one. I'm going to try and get there out of work. Hopefully, Councilman Hill and I can leave Legislative Office Building in the Capitol quick enough to get over on Thursday night. That is a great event. It recognizes graduates, typically those that have moved into Weathersfield, and it's just a way for them to connect with the town services. WEC does a great job with that. Councilman Lesser had mentioned the Memorial Day Parade. Weather so far looks good for Saturday. Glad that we are going to be doing it again. We had a brief reprieve from them during COVID, but this will be the second year since coming back. Dollars for Scholars has their event on May 31st at 7:30 at the Community Center. And then we've talked about it in the past, but it is coming up, fast approaching on Saturday, June 3rd, the fireworks. No set time. It's in the evening. I think festivities start around 5 o'clock. Fireworks to go off in the Cove around 9. And then finally, I put down June 5th, Laura's Garden garden party at the Charles. If you guys recall, last year about this time, we approved funding and work for that project at the Standish Park by Mikey's Place. They are having their second annual garden party for fundraiser for that event. So if folks are available on June 5th for that, again, that would be a great opportunity for the town to recognize all their work that they're doing. Okay. Nothing else? Move on. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. I think you and Ken both covered the items that I was going to cover. Just reiterate that Judy's race is the day after the fireworks, so anybody that's the Foundation's 5K, so it's encourage everyone to sign up for that. And flyers are right over there. Excellent. Thank you.
There's a couple of us on the green that will be on our lawn chairs watching that.
I provide music.
He provides the music, I provide the entertainment and the cheering. But no, that is always a great event that actually kicks off the whole cycle of road races in our neighborhood, Judy. So those are always great to see. It's a great community event, and
Roads are in much better shape this year.
That's right.
On my bike, I love it.
okay. Moving on, Sue?
Okay, the town clerk's office is in the process of preparing to send out the dog license renewals to owners this year. And currently, we have 1,926 dogs registered so far this year.
Do they go out June 1st?
We try to get them out a little bit before June 1st, right at the end of May, so that they hit the mailboxes on June 1st, and we can start issuing them during the month of June, beginning June 1st.
Great. Thanks for the reminder.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to council action. There is a bid before us. We've discussed it a couple times during the budget deliberations, but we have our town assessor, Mr. Topliff, here to discuss tonight's bid.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and the town council here in Weathersfield. I'm the assessor here for the town, and we have our every 5-year revaluation project due. It was due for October 1st, 23, but we sought a delay for that because the position of assessor was delayed and was vacant for many months, and so now we've pushed it back to 2024. And when I started here in February, we sent out the RFP fairly soon after I got here, and we have the results of the RFP before you. As you can see, we had 4 bids, ranging from $144,000 to $264,000, something like that. I eliminated down to 2 companies and did some research on those 2 companies. And I'm asking that the town council award the project to Tyler Technology. They're not the lowest bid, but I think they're the most qualified bid from the leader and the strong team that he has working for him. So that's my request this evening. Is there any questions?
Any questions for Walter? Well, I've got just a handful. All of these I've heard before. There is a huge discrepancy between equality and municipal valuation services. Is there any, and then, obviously your recommendation is kind of almost in the middle, a little bit less than the middle, but with the difference between municipal valuation and Tyler, is there a huge difference? I mean, I know it's $14,058, almost $60,000 difference, and then you include the photos, you're talking $80,000 difference.
It's like 40,000, right? 144 to 180.
Oh, no, I'm talking about Tyler and municipal
valuation? Yeah.
They just came in high?
They just, that's their bid. They understood the project, and that's their bid. Sometimes people bid the work. If they get it, they get it. They bid high, and because they really don't want the work. That could be a possibility.
Is Tyler located here in Connecticut?
Yes. Well, they're a national firm, but they have a strong presence here in Connecticut. They just finished up the Hartford reval last year. They did, under Soundview, Tyler bought out Soundview, which John Valenti was a part of. And they did Cromwell, they've done Hartford, they just finished Groton the year before that. So they have a very strong presence here in Connecticut.
Well, if they did Groton, Mary Gardner must have given them a thumbs up, so.
She wrote a glowing letter of recommendation.
Okay. And then staffing-wise, they have the ability to, I know we're starting to get on to the cycle of, obviously, we're on every 5 years, but there's regions that do these.
Right. So
And-
Mr. Mayor, we're delaying our reval by 1 year, but then we're going to have to come back after 4 years and go back onto that 5-year cycle that the state just passed for the regional, where those regions do the revaluation together.
And Tyler has the staffing now to be able to work with the town to do that?
Yes, here locally, but what's great about Tyler being such a large firm is if something catastrophic happened, they have resources to pull in other people. So they are doing the whole state of Delaware right now. They are a large national firm, like I said.
The whole state of Delaware.
The
There's
whole state of Delaware.
600,000 people in Delaware. They all live north of the canal. I know
And they
that.
are being revaled by Tyler Technologies, the entire state.
Got it. Okay. Any further questions?
Just have one.
Yep. Mr. Deputy Mayor?
Walter, is the 5-year cycle, is it the same exact process, or is like one more intense than the next 5 years?
Okay, so you may have heard in the past statistical versus full measure and list. Remeasuring the same house over and over again doesn't make any fiscal sense. So what we do to comply with the full measure and list is we send out data mailers, and then we do a comprehensive field review, meaning we lay eyes on every property in town. And that's our visit to that site, is laying eyes and checking, looking at the card and going through that process. If we just did a full measure and list and had to hire people to go out, this bid would be 3-4 times higher than it is right now.
Thank you.
No further questions? Okay. Anybody with a motion?
Sure. Motion to approve the 2023-11 bid award to the town revaluation in the amount of $186,000 and to authorize the town manager to execute all documents necessary to complete the project.
Second.
Just one comment. Do we need to, it has the amount, and then obviously Tyler came in with the amount, but do we need to mention Tyler Technologies in the motion?
The bid number is referenced, so this is the recommended bid. So it certainly, you could certainly mention Tyler in the motion.
Well, if that is the actual bid that Tyler put in, that's their bid number? Is that what you're saying? It's not the,
This is the bid award is 23-11.
got it. Okay. No sense in designating that. Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carries.
Thank you all very much. The project will commence on like July 5th. Thank you.
Thank you. And you will have a new staff person hopefully soon to be able to help.
I'm on that right now, so we're trying to get a posting out, so. I'm
First one in the queue.
Yep. Well, as Matt Hart said, and it is tough to find, and as Walter knows, and we all know, it's tough to find staff right now in this current situation that we're facing.
That is true.
Thank you, Walter. Okay. Moving forward to a consent agenda. I know we have a couple items before us that don't have any actions on them, but there is one for the Wellness Vendor Contract Award. I don't know if anybody had reviewed that, had any questions, wanted to go over anything. We do have Chris here, Chris Martone Chris Monroe, sorry, to go, I should know it, Jesus, I've got Kim Martone in my head from another department. But to go over any questions on this wellness program.
Move the consent agenda be approved.
Second.
Okay. That includes the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Chris, thank you for coming.
Mr. Martone, thanks you.
Mrs. Martone, thanks you for coming home before 8:30. There you go.
See you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
And moving forward, there is no ordinance or resolutions before us. We do have those 3 items for unfinished business with ARPA. And if I can just move forward on my agenda. We have before us, and I don't want to steal all your thunder, Mr. Town Manager, you can go over it, but these are 3 items that we had seen through the budget that we recommend going forward on, but not through the budget, but we do, as we've heard, have about $914,000, $915,000 left, and these are some items that not only would help the town, but the entire town with some of their services for us. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Town Manager, be able to go and discuss it a little bit better.
Yeah, I don't really have much more to add other than the Economic Development Strategic Plan. That would follow your strategic plan. So you recently approved that project. That's going to be commencing over the next few weeks and running through early fall, and right after which economic development will begin their specific economic development strategic plan, and that's what these funds are for. The dump truck, this is an item you've seen last year in the CNEF list, and also again this year. This is for the F-350 truck with the dump for physical services. And then the final one is the town radio network Sentry. These are all end-of-life items that our radio folks feel are critical that we get replaced to maintain the integrity of the system.
Any questions for Mr. Town Manager on these?
Thank you, Mayor. Can you talk a little bit more about the radio? And you just mentioned that they feel it's critical. It's a fairly significant price tag, and I know we had some discussions on this on the budget, and how many folks are actually using the radio system. There was talk we had 500 units, and that not all 500 were not being used. So just a little more discussion on how much you think this may or may not be necessary.
So these Sentry units are not the individual radios themselves. These are the network Sentry units that are required for the system to run. So I think that's a different conversation from the number of radios question that did come up. I will pull up, I did get the number verified for the radios. The total number that you heard, around 500, includes everything. And that includes every radio that's on a desk or in a vehicle. So those are the hard, the actual ones in police cars and fire trucks and things like that, those radios. And also the ones in the facilities, so police station has their radios in multiple locations. They're more the console type radio systems. And then you have the handheld units, of which, and I'm going to pull up, he just sent this to me last week, but it's more in line with the number that you would expect for the number of handhelds, which was the question. There are not 500 handhelds. There are 500 total radios throughout the system, roughly.
And this 125,000, is it to
This is to replace these.
Replace that supports the entire?
To replace the Sentry. To replace the Sentry units only, which really control the network. Yeah.
And is it an upgrade? And I apologize if I don't remember the whole discussion when they came before us. Is it an upgrade? Is the current system no longer up to date? Is the current system in disrepair? I don't remember the full discussion on that. Do you?
Yeah, so,
Tom may
Could I
recall the
jump in there?
discussion.
So, from what I was told, or what I understood, these devices are operating on Windows XP, which is no longer a supported operating system. And so that is the first step in upgrading the entire radio system, which is the much larger $2 million bill. And the way it was presented is like, this is kind of critical because of this old operating system. So that would be the first step in advancing the whole system.
Thank you, Tom. So it sounds like the software doesn't support, it's not up to date if we need to do this from what you're saying, or how you understood what they said.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify the numbers, so I pulled up the email it had. So from the inventory sheet that we have, there are 15 control stations. There are 142 mobile radios. Those are the ones in the vehicles. And that's across the town. And that's, all of our vehicles have radios in them, the ones that, so all the Parks and Rec vehicles, the physical services vehicles, the fire departments, the police department, all have the mobile radios in them. And then there are 255 portable radios that are distributed to individuals. In some cases, there are portables put on vehicles. Fire trucks need to maintain a certain number of them. And there are, of that 255, there are a number that have to be kept as backup because they go down all the time. Switches come off or break, and they have to bring them in and work on them, and they put others out in the field. So the total number of devices is 412.
And that's helpful. I'll just make the comment, is one of the other things he said that caught my attention is there's not widespread use of the radios, that they need to do more training, and that a lot of the guys and gals are not really using them, and it's a significant investment from us that's not being fully utilized.
Yeah, so what I would say to that is the majority of the radios are fully utilized. So, and I said majority because police use them constantly, fire department use them, and Parks and Rec and facilities, physical services use them. Others have them as well. So they're up in the building office. I've got one in my office. There are various directors, if they're on the emergency management team, they have them. And they could be better utilized and more utilized as opposed to the cell phones. One thing I will note is that, again, when we have if we have an emergency, and I've lived through this a few times, I've been in 7 now declared disasters.
Here?
No.
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 It's like 7 in
In my career as a town manager or
Put that on your resume.
county administrator. And when you have the major disasters, the cell phones are very unreliable because everybody's on their cell phone because their mother and their aunt and their brother from Peoria are all calling them saying, what's going on? Are you okay? Do you need help? What can we do? So it bogs down the network and you can't get calls in or out. You really need the handheld radios to be able to communicate during the emergencies. So I think what Mr. Kelleher was trying to say during that thing is that they want to see higher utilization of the radios so that they don't have to learn that in the emergency.
They're not relying on their cell phones.
Yeah.
I got it. That's helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Mr. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, just want to add a little bit of background. If you recall, last year, we took all the CNEF and capital improvement projects off the budget, and our intent was to fund a number of those with ARPA funds. The first 2 items, the economic development plan and the truck, had been approved at the committee level, and for whatever reason, they just never got acted on by the council. And so really, it's the radios that was a different item. And I just thought it was, prudent to approve these sooner rather than later so that we don't go into another cycle. Thank you.
Any further questions? Hearing none. Do we have a motion before us?
I'll make a motion to budget and appropriate ARPA revenue replacement funds for the following projects. $15,000 for the economic development strategic plan, $69,000 for F-350 truck with dump, and $125,000 for town radio network sentry.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further comment? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Is it 3 or 4? All 4?
I voted aye.
You voted
6-3, I think.
6-3? Okay. You've got that?
No. Who, can my nays just tell me?
Cindy voted yes.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next item before us, and this is the block grant. If I'm not mistaken. Yes, new business, 5A, resolution for the town of Weathersfield authorizing the application for a Connecticut Small Cities Community Development Block Grant in the amount not to exceed $2 million for improvements to the Harvey Fuller Senior Housing Complex owned by the Weathersfield Housing Authority.
And Mayor, if I could, both of these items are for introduction. They are required resolutions for the application process with the state. So per your charter, they have to be introduced first. So this is for introduction only for this meeting, but in addition to the first resolution, the following one is just a resolution endorsing an updated fair housing policy for the town of Weathersfield. You all approved a fair housing policy back in 2017. I believe you did an update in 2019 when we applied for a round at that point, but we're required to update it anytime you apply. So there have been simple modifications done to that plan that's part of your background package, but both items will come back to you at the next meeting for public hearing and subsequent vote. The application deadline was previously May 23rd. The state has extended that to June 23rd.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. And just for introduction, so moving on to public comment. Mr. Young, if you want to speak for the second time, the floor is yours.
Robert Young, 20 Copper Mill Road.
Hang on one second, Mr. Young.
I just wanted to say, I think that there's a need for a correction in the housing policies.
Okay.
Under the part about the complaint process, it says our address is in Long.
Okay. That was a good catch.
Maybe been some copying and pasting?
We'll circle back with the consultant and make sure those are corrected. Thank you.
Part of the regionalization.
Yes, right. Yeah.
We're in the
Wallingford gets all of our money.
South Central region. Okay, good catch on that. Okay, got it. Now, Mr. Young.
Thank you. Robert Young, 20 Copper Mill Road. You just voted on the Economic Development Strategic Plan for $15,000. I think it's disgraceful. When we start looking at what that group of people do, I think there might only be one or two of that economic development group we have in town. When we look at the foodways building, there's nothing been done there. We look at the convalescent home over on Jordan Lane, nothing being done over there. There's a number of other places around that need work or development, and it's not happening. We should be looking at getting rid of, if we need someone to get rid of, the economic development people. They're not doing anything for this town. Next. I was talking about the State Street and Main Street, and I would urge you, I think that's a terrible corner that they're newly building. And I would hope that you would act on that right away while those workers are still there and get it fixed correctly, so it doesn't have to be redone over like those fields over at Mill Woods and other places. And when we think about other things that don't get done right in this town, like the Webb School windows, 15 years ago on the referendum, and they were on the referendum back in November again to be replaced. We think about the trashing and the destruction that goes on at the bathrooms at Mill Woods that we never heard about until last meeting from that citizen that came up who was part of what? He knew something about the sports that was going on down there, and Kathy Bagley supported the idea that supported what he was saying, that those bathrooms were trashed and destructed. It was terrible. And nobody, Kathy Bagley never did anything legally to catch these people or bring in the police to catch them. Now, we just had a referendum back in November for the schools, and I'm glad that had failed. I've noticed now in the newspaper where towns of Farmington, the town of Southington had referendums, the town of Cromwell had referendums, and now they're finding out that those referendums are under budgeted and how they need more money, or in the case of Southington, they're going to cut back building a library by 30%. If they had taken that $279 million that Wethersfield had, and before the year was over, determined that the costs have gone up like Farmington, 30%, that would have added $82 million to the $275 million price tag. And it makes me wonder, Mayor, who puts these numbers together? Is it a game where you keep coming in with low numbers? I mean, I don't care about Farmington, but obviously that happened there. Obviously it happened in Cromwell. Come in at, they knew these people are experts who were putting the numbers together. They're paid people, and they come in 20%, 30% lower. We would have been in that same boat if that referendum had passed. And we would have been looking at screaming of people saying, we don't want to downsize what we want, so we need another 80 or so many millions more added on to the 279 million. I mean, that would have brought us up into the, incredible number. And nobody is responsible. I mean, Farmington should hang whoever put those numbers together. Cromwell should hang whoever put those numbers together. And Weathersfield should always hang someone who puts bad numbers together.
Mr. Young, are you talking about killing someone? Is that what you're doing right now?
Am I what?
Are you talking about killing someone?
No, they're just behind.
I move for a point of order.
If they can't put their numbers together, they shouldn't be in business.
I move for a point of order, Mayor.
They shouldn't be in business
agree with
if they can't put their numbers together correctly.
Move for a point of order,
And that
Mayor.
same goes in this
It's
town.
absolutely
Mr. Young, please.
uncivil.
Oh, okay, well, why don't we put them to the yoke and put the whip to them then?
That is even worse.
I mean, why not? Hey, have a nice
Mr. Young,
night.
I think your 5 minutes are up, but I do
I'm sure
have
they
to.
are, but we need to be accountable, Mayor. When we bring in a
Be accountable, we cannot be
referendum, we need
killers
to
or
be
murderers.
accountable.
So,
Because I know there'll be another one coming up.
motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.